Whew. Right, as someone who doesn't use social media anymore, thank God. By the way, use Buffer. If you have to use social media for your career, use Buffer. You don't need to use social media. Get off there. It's horrible. Anyway, I miss out on all the ridiculous stuff that happens online, but thanks to news articles, I've heard there's a stupid trend with AI history videos, which are ridiculous. Let's talk about them, shall we? So, what I can see from the AI history trend is that people are reimagining themselves watching like Snapchats really of famous people from history. Like the moment Thomas Edison invented the light bulb in a room filled with light bulbs with a camera available. Just to make any sense. But the one that seems to be catching the most attention online has been the POV trend, the point of view trend. So the point of view, you wake up and it's 1351 during the Black Plague in London. Or point of view, you woke up as a Roman gladiator. Or my favourite, point of view, you started the Great Fire of London. So they're pretty amateurish and sensational. The audio is majorly cringe, like they haven't put any effort into that whatsoever. But I can see the appeal of the videos and I can see why they've become such a talking point and they've become popular. You know, the Black Plague video reads like a horror game, which is quite enticing. It's incredibly grim, it's gruesome, and the other videos kind of have a similar dark twist to them. Obviously, people love immersive storytelling, and people online have also proven themselves time and time again to love a good bit of schadenfreude, and we love seeing someone's downfall and can't resist learning all about a little bit of gossip. And what's a greater downfall to watch than watching someone die of the Black Plague or an eruption of Vesuvius? So obviously I despise AI art, but there's an argument that people have said, which is, oh, what's the harm in these AI history videos? You know, I think they're meant to be engaging and they can help promote an interest in history, especially in younger people. And obviously seeing history through a lens which is familiar to an audience, such as point of view or vlogging, makes history seem more relatable, particularly to young audiences, but to most people, really. But of course, unregulated AI usage depicting history can have dangerous implications and can serve those who wish to present a false version of history, such as Holocaust deniers, for example. So if people take these AI videos seriously, which many young people will, regardless of what people think they will, they will, without further research or even a shimmer of critical thought, incorrect lessons and perceptions can be taken away from these videos. In fact, they are. They very much easily are. So in an interview conducted by the BBC with Barbara Keyes, a professor in US history at Durham University, she analysed a video portraying a worker in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant the day of the reactor explosion on 26th of April 1986. And she points out that the reactor in the video is shown based on images taken after the disaster, not before. I would never have picked up on that. I know nothing about nuclear energy or those reactors, but she argues that such an image would inaccurately present the Soviet technology at the time, and as something which is flawed, rather than something incredibly advanced for its time, which it was. Now that may seem like an insignificant thing, but it's not. These videos may be incredibly visually appealing, but in terms of educating, they're incredibly poor. They don't teach people about history or even what truly happened. The Pompeii video is a prime example about this. So what we know from the written account of Pliny the Younger, who witnessed the event itself, we know that the eruption didn't start with lava spewing from the volcano as it does in this video. Hello, so I come to you without any makeup on my face, barefaced, here I am, to share with you today's sponsor, who's bringing today's video, which is Foreo. So I've been very kindly given Foreo's FAQ 202 New Generation LED Face Mask. And what's really important to me, first off the bat, is that I work with companies that are vegan and cruelty-free, and they are. Thank goodness for that. So straight off the bat, I was very excited to have the opportunity to try out their latest FAQ 202 mask. So this is a very incredibly lightweight, flexi-fit silicone mask, which is completely wireless, thank goodness for that, so it makes it really easy to wear. So I've been wearing it whilst I've been reading, I've also worn it whilst I'm watching my partner play The Witcher. And what's fascinating about red LED is that red LED light therapy reduces the inflammation and stimulates the production of collagen. This mask has 8 different wavelengths, including NIR, which means that the mask can tackle signs of aging and other skin conditions. So redness is what I primarily suffer from. I have a lot of redness on my cheeks and face. I had kind of more patchy skin. It also helps skin look less dull, so it kind of brightens up the skin and complexion. It also minimises the appearance of your pores, reduces fine lines and wrinkles, wrinkles, and also helps make skin just appear more smooth with a fewer sunspots if you suffer from those. So if you'd like to check out FAQ 202 like this, or any of the other Foreo bestsellers, then you can click the link in the description box down below and use my code, and you'll get 30% off all Foreo products. It doesn't matter which one, it could be this or anything else that catches your eye, and also the code is stackable, so you can get an extra 30% off anything that's already discounted. Thank you so much, Foreo, for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back into it. You see, when writing to Tacitus of his uncle's death, Pliny wrote, quote, "Broad flames shone out in several places from Mount Vesuvius, which the darkness of the night contributed to render still brighter and clearer. But my uncle, in order to soothe the apprehensions of his friend, assured him it was only the burning of the villages, which the country people had abandoned to the flames. After this he retired to rest, and it is most certain that he was so little disquieted as to fall into a sound sleep, for his breathing, which, on account of his corpulence, was rather heavy and sonorous, was heard by the attendants outside, the court, which led to his apartment, being now almost filled with stones and ashes. If he had continued there any time longer, it would have been impossible for him to have made his way out. So he awoke and got up, went to Pomponius and the rest of his company, who were feeling too anxious to think of going to bed. They consulted together whether it would be most prudent to truss the houses, which now rocked from side to side in frequent and violent concussions, as though shaken from their very foundations, or fly to the open fields, where the calcined stones and cinders, though light indeed, yet fell in large showers, and threatened destruction. In this choice of dangers they resolved for the fields, a resolution which, while the rest of the company were hurried into by their fears, my uncle embraced upon cool and deliberate consideration. They went out then, having pillows tied to their heads with napkins, and this was their whole defence against the storm of stones that fell upon them. It was now day everywhere else, but there a deeper darkness prevailed in the thickest night." Pliny's uncle sadly died. He suffocated on volcanic ash and gas. Many people in the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius died by suffocation or the collapse of buildings and other structures. Yet it's strongly hypothesized by the bodies that we have that became casts, those people died not of suffocation but instantly of extreme heat, with many of the casualties shocked into a sort of instant rigor mortis. It's mortifying. And when I say extreme heat, we're talking extreme heat. Mount Vesuvius released over 100,000 times the thermal energy of the 2 atomic bombs that dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. Now, this extreme heat was obviously not lava, as presented in the video. What killed these people was a pyroclastic flow. But lava flows so slowly, it can be basically outpaced by simply walking a bit too quickly. It certainly wasn't cascading down in these AI videos, or how Hollywood often depicts eruptions with fireballs and things like that. Pyroclastic flow would have been much faster and much more horrific. But this AI video, with several million views, perpetuates the historic and scientific inaccurate version of the events. As such, this video fails to be an effective point of view at all. Now, whilst the owners and creators of these TikToks claim that they don't purport to be historically accurate, what is their purpose then, other than to farm views and attention? And yes, I can see your argument, that's not an unusual motive for being on the internet. It's really a rule rather than an exception. But I would argue the science and history of these events is what makes them fascinating, not the gory sensationalization of the deaths of thousands, and in some case, millions of people. And if it's just sensationalization, clicks and views people are getting, where does this end? When does depicting sensationalized deaths of innocents in history draw a line? Pompeii, or point of view, you woke up in Auschwitz? Now, obviously, I'm not here to moralize the discussion of deaths in history because I believe historical events are worth preserving and discussing. But if the aim of these videos is to not be historically accurate, but to be sensationalist for views and money, what is stopping someone from creating the same content from a horrific point of view of modern history, which is not only tasteless, but worsened by the fact that the content is laced with historical inaccuracies which may benefit the agenda of those who deny how certain events unfolded or even happened. So let's look again at how wildly inaccurate these are by looking at the point of view you woke up in 1351 during the Black Plague. The video opens up with 2 huge glaring errors here, so let's start with the aesthetic one first. The viewer is immediately hit with a visual that is every COVID pandemic person's worst nightmare, a scene of people-filled streets, seemingly walking in a circle. And this is immediately the first thing that's wrong with the video, aesthetically speaking. We'll come back to the date in a second. Now, whilst people back in the 14th century didn't understand how the plague worked, they weren't completely ignorant to certain elements, and social gatherings, or even street gatherings, were not a thing during the outbreaks of plague. Quarantining has been a thing since the 14th century due to the plethora of plagues which spread across Europe, albeit quarantining was imposed somewhat haphazardly during the years of the Black Plague, and they weren't really imposed. But social isolation and quarantining became sort of a byproduct of people who were too terrified to socialise with other people, and they hid away because they didn't know what caused the plague. They weren't taking any risks by socialising or walking in a big circle with other people who may have the plague. It was Venice who enforced a rule during the years of the Black Death where ships had to anchor for 40 days before the crew and the passengers were allowed to come ashore, hence the name quarantine. Quarantino, 40 in Italian. Ironically, it's actually believed that quarantining, along with improved hygiene and sanitation, is the primary reason the Black Plague died out. Social distancing and quarantining at the time before vaccinations was the most effective method that they had available to them. I mean, also hilariously, there's another scene later on in the video where you, the person, go to visit your dying mother, but that was almost famously an unlikely situation to happen. In Aberdeen, John of Fordun, a Scottish chronicler, recorded that, quote, "This sickness befell people everywhere, but especially the middling and lower classes, rarely the great. It generated such horror that children did not dare to visit their dying parents, nor parents their children, but fled for fear of contagion, as if from leprosy or a serpent." Again, the chronicler is kind of suggesting people weren't visiting their parents, nor were they walking in a circle around each other when they weren't even willing to see their dying parents. The plague arrived in London in November 1348, arriving in England around May of 1348. Now, London got hit by a combination of the pneumonic and bubonic, and it raged in London until spring 1350. It's generally assumed that the plague had killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of the populace by 1350. Now this takes me to the second glaring error in the first screenshot. The year is 1351. The first pestilence of the Black Death had died out by September 1350. The second pestilence didn't come back until 1361, so we have a wrong number straight off the bat. It wouldn't have been here. So going back to the mother figure in this video, we see a very elaborate red cross that's not exactly drawn on, but kind of built into the door. Now, a red plague cross in the later period, note I say later, we'll come back to that, more likely it was painted on. It was much easier than building in the feature. Some were physically strapped onto the door, but most likely it was painted on. Now, this would have been a solid rectangular cross rather than this plus sign that it kind of appears like on the video here. And the intention of the solid cross was to look like a crucifix, not like a do not enter kind of red cross as it is here. And it was to inform people that the person inside was infected. The person with a red cross on their door was locked inside. No one was coming in to visit them, okay? So your point of view, you would not have seen your mother dying. And let's return to me saying it's a later experience because it was a much later period. The red cross on the door was not a feature of the Black Death in the mid-14th century, but a feature of the Great Plague in 1665. In 1665, the Mayor of London stated in one of the regulations, quote, "Every house visited by the disease be marked with a red cross of a foot long in the middle of the door, evident to be seen, and with these usual printed words, that is to say, Lord have mercy upon us, to be set close over the same cross, there to continue until lawful opening of the same house." People were said to be so afraid of the red cross on the door that they didn't even look at it for fear of catching the plague. So every 40 days, the red cross would be replaced with a white one, which remained there for 20 days more until anyone could come in. The rules were that, quote, "No clothes or household stuff be removed out of the house into any house for at least 3 months after, unless the persons so infected have occasion to change their habitation." So the cross is anachronistic by a few hundred years. You weren't going into that house, you weren't allowed to go into that house to visit your mother, she had a cross on it, and it wasn't here, it was in the Great Plague, not the Black Plague. Speaking of anachronistic, let's take a look at the plague doctor, shall we? So, In the point of view, we go and pick up mother's medicine from a plague doctor. Now this, we all know, is a 17th century plague doctor outfit and not what they would have looked like in the 14th century during the Black Death. The earliest reference we have to plague doctors wearing masks is in 1373, when Johann Jacobi recommends that they start using masks when they're visiting people, though there's no physical description of what these masks look like. According to Michel Tibayrenc's book, the Encyclopedia of Infectious Diseases, the famed plague doctor outfit that we are seeing in this Black Death video was first mentioned mid-17th century by the royal physician Charles de Lorme. Plague doctors during the 14th century were few and far between, and we don't know what they look like. Of the 18 men registered as plague doctors in Venice in 1348, 5 of them died and 12 of them fled. So they're not exactly really hanging around during the Black Plague, and I don't blame them. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking the inaccurate depiction of what a plague doctor looked like in the 14th century is completely trivial. But to me, it's as ridiculous as having a video of Jacobean actors performing in Blackfriars Theatre, all wearing Nike trainers in an AI video. Because that's how far out they are. And with all due respect, being 300 years out of costume representation unfairly homogenises not only the plagues, but their impact throughout history. And really, to me, it homogenises history itself, because it reduces anything and everything that was before the 20th century to a big blob of nothing but the olden days. So why I have an issue with the AI? One is AI art, which is completely atrocious and foul and scummy. Two is historically inaccurate. And yes, whilst you may be doing it for entertainment, you're really sensationalizing horrific events in history for the purpose of money and clickbait. And where does the line end? When does it start becoming deeply problematic, and when can it become manipulated? You can make quote-unquote small tweaks, which I don't think are small, like lava flowing through Pompeii, which may seem harmless, but it's completely unscientific and it's completely historically inaccurate. But then you can make small tweaks, like, oh, a plague doctor and a Red Cross existing 300 years before it did in the wrong plague. Where does it change? What else gets constituted as a small tweak? How prisoners in Auschwitz experience life? If Auschwitz even happened at all? Where does it get changed? And that's my issue with it. You don't have to be historically inaccurate to be entertaining. And that's where I think I kind of draw a line. You know, like, you can engage people with history, but it's lazily done. The price we're paying is technically, I think, more dangerous and damaging and can be manipulated by people that we don't really appreciate manipulating history. So that is why I'm like, no, let's call it out as it is. It's not just nitpicking for fun. Like, we can nitpick the new Odyssey film by Christopher Nolan all we want, but really it doesn't matter, because that is entertainment and he's not being historically accurate because it's a bloody stupid film and we know it is. But when you're potentially presenting educational content, but then caveating it with an asterisk in an article saying, I'm not purporting to be historically accurate, whilst also benefiting from tragedies in history that are completely inaccurate. Just have some bloody pride, for the love of God. Why don't people have more pride these days? There should be more shame. Just like holding people to higher standards and not giving these things millions of views, because it's lazy and they should be sad. That's what I'm saying. They should feel sad that they're being lazy and it's not fun, because you have the ability. No, you don't have the ability because you're stealing AI art, but there are artists out there who have the ability to make incredible historically accurate presentations of history that's far more engaging than my videos ever could be, and it deserves to be told correctly, because it'd be a way easier way of teaching kids history, which is really bloody important. Rant over. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you mainly, as always, to my patrons, my wonderful, wonderful Patreons, for allowing this to be my career of ranting about nerdy things online. I really appreciate it. I have a podcast called The Annotated Mind. I also have Substack, so you can sign up for that for my newsletter. And I have a second channel where I talk about everything else that's not history or literature related, but I just want to rant about it. As always, I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives. So keep reading.